Neon flowed through the streets of the lower sector like liquid poison, seeping into every crack of the battered buildings and reflecting in puddles of oily reagents. In the megapolis of Acheron, night never truly came. It was merely a shift in the spectrum of light, from the cold blue glow of ads to the dense green of emergency signs and the crimson hue of warnings. Even the shadows in this city felt artificial, as if they belonged to someone else. Krista had grown accustomed to this constant radiance. It had followed her since childhood, and now she could distinguish things in it that other residents had long accepted as background noise. Faint flickers of sensors, micro-pulses of surveillance cameras, vibrations of power lines. The layering of sounds was so dense that the human mind had long stopped noticing them. But Krista somehow heard more than she should. She didn't consider it an ability, just a part of her world, a strange intuition that helped her avoid trouble. Working as a data courier left no room for mistakes. Narrow passages between container homes, darting scanner drones, grim figures wrapped in synthetic cloaks. All of it formed a labyrinth in which she felt not like a captive but an observer. She slid smoothly between vendor stalls of the underground markets, where implants of unknown origin were sold, along with forbidden neuroenhancers, components for hacking modules, and even rare relics of the bygone era. Old mechanical watches, paper books left over after the digital transition. Krista carried a sealed container with an encrypted data block on her back. She never asked what she was delivering, not her business. She knew only one thing. If anyone from the collectorium learned the roots of couriers like her life would end the same way. The lives of all phantoms ended, and those suspected of anomalous abilities, with disappearance. Not death, that word had long vanished from official vocabulary. But everyone knew what lay behind it, and yet today felt different. The air seemed thicker, heavier, like before a storm that would never happen. Down here, beneath Acheron's metal structures, storms were impossible. Climate was controlled by the upper sectors. Here, at the bottom of the city, the only flashes came from discharged transformers or sudden short circuits. Krista quickened her pace. From around the next corner came metallic scraping, as if something heavy was shifting, catching on support beams. She usually avoided such areas. Illegal crews often worked there, mining metal, and could easily drop an unwanted structure from above. But today there was no time. The client, as always, required delivery at a precise hour. The scraping grew louder. She lifted her head and saw a massive platform above, supported by temporary braces. It looked like the workers were expanding one of the catwalks, but doing it hastily. Krista felt something was off. The thin hum around her intensified, and the air seemed to vibrate. She paused for a moment, calculating her route, and then one of the fastening mechanisms snapped. The platform lurched, its front end dropping toward the narrow passage. People nearby didn't even have time to shout, but Krista already saw how it would happen. She didn't know how she knew. Maybe it was a calculation felt through the body, or maybe something else. The heavy metal frame collapsed, falling directly toward her. Krista jerked back, but knew she wouldn't make it. The world around her seemed to slow. Her heartbeat turned into distant thuds. The air thickened, and in that thickness, she felt a push from within. Not physical, but as if a thought had gained mass, as if she could touch the world through a second body. The platform suddenly changed trajectory. It didn't freeze or stop, it simply shifted to the right, as if something invisible had shoved it sideways. It crashed onto the metal containers, sending up a cloud of sparks from ruptured cables, but left the passage intact. Krista froze. She tried to understand what had just happened. Around her, muffled curses from the workers could already be heard. Sensor flashes recorded the damage, but no one looked at her. Everyone was focused on avoiding the debris. Her fingers trembled. She felt a faint current run across her skin, from her palms to her shoulders. Coincidence? Luck? Or something else? The thought was frightening, and she pushed it away immediately. In a world where those with anomalous abilities were hunted, where any sign of the unusual was treated as a threat, it was dangerous to admit even to herself that something beyond the natural had occurred. She took a deep breath and forced herself to move on. Krista reached the meetup spot, a shaky metal platform beneath a major pipeline. Orders were often left there. A mechanical box built into the wall awaited her. She pressed her gloved hand to the reader, and the data block slid smoothly inside. A moment later, the container gave her confirmation delivery complete. She was about to leave when she felt the familiar vibration of her transmitter. The ping detonated softly in her pocket, but that was strange. The transmitter rarely activated on its own, only in the event of a system failure. Krista pulled out the device. A symbol flickered on the holographic glass, the one that meant incoming surveillance drones. Panic struck her chest like a brief blow. She pressed herself to the wall, calculating escape paths, but the silhouettes of drones were already gliding between the pipes on the upper levels. They weren't supposed to scan this deep into the lower sector, which meant they were looking for someone specific. She heard quiet pulses, the rhythm of scanning growing closer. Krista tried to slip into a narrow gap between containers, but then a shadow rose to her right, gently blocking the exit. The movement was familiar, too familiar. Adam stood before her. He appeared silently, as if he were a piece of the city itself. His steps always dissolved among the hums of Acheron, perhaps because he'd known these streets since childhood more intimately than anyone else. His gaze was alert but calm. There was no panic in it, only attention to detail and the confidence that he knew exactly what to do. He lifted his hand, a small wave modulator flickered in his palm. Homemade, assembled from parts of different decades. Adam could build devices from scrap, and each worked better than factory-made ones. The modulator emitted a barely audible pulse. A temporal interference zone opened around them, a soft dome, and the drones lost the ability to detect heat or movement within its boundary. They flew overhead, sending out blind pulses, but none noticed the two figures below. Even though Krista had known Adam all her life, such things still astonished her. He seemed woven into the rhythm of the megapolis, its hidden echo. He said nothing, only nodded, showing the path was clear. She moved beside him. Their movements were synchronized as always. Since childhood, they had understood each other without words, and now it helped. The interference held until they reached a secondary route where scanning didn't reach. When they finally stopped in the shade of the old hive-like residential blocks, Adam looked at her again. His gaze lingered a little longer than usual. She couldn't tell if he saw something in her expression or sensed the tension in her muscles, but in that moment she felt he knew about the platform, about what had happened, or at least sensed that something had changed. He handed her a small impulse beacon, a warning that inspections would likely increase in the coming days. She nodded in gratitude, and in that instant, a thin, invisible thread seemed to pass between them, fragile, delicate, like the glow of advertisements on wet asphalt. When Krista returned home, she felt as if the entire city was watching her. Cameras tracked her too closely. Sensors blinked more frequently. Drones crossed routes they had never patrolled before. Perhaps it was only paranoia, perhaps something else. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, her thoughts returned again to the moment beneath the falling platform. She remembered that strange inner impulse, not muscular, but something different, as if her mind had reached out into the world. She tried to recreate that feeling, but nothing happened. Only a faint coldness in her palms. When the door closed behind her, she felt relief. Here, among the tight walls, old furniture, and the buzz of ventilation, she usually found peace. But today was different. The room felt unfamiliar. The outlines of objects blurred, as if her vision were trying to grasp something beyond explanation. She sat on the edge of the bed and closed her eyes. And in the darkness behind her eyelids, the memory flashed. The bending metal, the shifting trajectory of the falling structure. It felt less like a miracle, more like deliberate action, precise and controlled, as if performed by will alone. Krista opened her eyes sharply. If it had been real, if it was an ability, then she was in danger. Real danger. Not the vague kind she had felt before. Not the abstract threat of phantoms that always applied to someone else. Now it concerned her. And far above, in the glass halls of the upper city, someone had already tuned a surveillance system that detected an unusual energy spike in the lower sector. The data went into a report. No name was listed yet, only coordinates and a timestamp. But for Draive Sollaris, a name was unnecessary. He already knew he had found a new source, and the city that knew no darkness suddenly felt smaller than ever. Morning in the lower sector was no different from night. The light merely changed in tone, growing harsher. Neon gave way to the sterile white shimmer of lamps embedded throughout the ventilation system. The city opened its eyes through the rumble of pipes, the smell of heated metal, and the monotonous drone of structural vibrations, as if a giant machine were returning to life after a brief pause. Krista woke earlier than usual. Sleep never settled properly. It broke apart into fragments in which the metal platform fell toward her again and again. In every dream, she felt the moment when the world slowed down, and that soft push from within as if her body were not just flesh but something more. And each time she awoke, her palms tingled faintly, as though the energy had surfaced only to slip away again. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the cold floor beneath her feet. The room was half dark. A gloom even the glow of ads filtering through the narrow blinds could not disperse. On the table, the transmitter Atom had left for her blinked quietly with its warning symbol. Krista touched it with her fingertips, as if to make sure it was real, that the events of yesterday were not simply a product of an anxious imagination. But the consequences remained with her inside, beneath the skin, like invisible waves. She stepped outside, merging with the morning stream of people. The lower sector woke violently. Merchants opened their stalls. Mechanics cracked open old device casings to salvage parts. Children darted through the passages, evading random inspections. The elderly sat on the steps, watching the traffic, the city's living cameras. Acheron never slept, but it was the morning that brought the sensation of chaos on the verge of settling into familiar routine. Krista headed toward the workstation to collect a new assignment. Her steps were steady, but tension lingered in her chest, that inner feeling that the world had become too narrow for her secrets. She wanted to believe it would pass, that what had happened yesterday was an accident. People often misinterpreted events, especially under stress. Yes, it could have been an accident. But as she walked past one of the overloaded energy distribution lines, something beside her jerked. A small metal box lying on the railing quivered suddenly and toppled off. Krista flinched. She hadn't touched it, hadn't even looked at it. She had only felt the faintest nudge inside. Not like yesterday, but similar, diminished, like an echo of something greater. She held her breath and quickened her pace. Her fingers curled coldly. Her mind wrestled with a thought that grew more persistent. Something was happening to her. But what was the point of dwelling on it? All she could do now was hope no one had noticed anything unusual. The order distribution station was located in an old hangar converted into a data node. It was always noisy here, from server blocks, from aging fans, from people waiting for their tasks. Krista checked into the system, doing her best to look natural, and headed for the exit. She caught her reflection in a polished scrap of metal. For a second, she thought she saw herself as someone else. Not a tired courier, but someone carrying a hidden pulse within, ready to break free. She looked away, unwilling to entertain the thought. Outside, the air was thick with moisture and electricity. It seemed the upper sectors were undergoing some massive network rerouting. It always affected the lower levels. On such days, neon patches flickered, sensors glitched, and motion detectors reacted to their own shadows. Krista walked briskly, avoiding eye contact with anyone, but her anxiety grew. Every time she passed a surveillance camera, She felt as if it were capturing not just her face, but something more, something unseen. As if the system's main question wasn't who she was, but what. Her thoughts were so tangled that she didn't notice she had been watched for some time by one of the patrol drone modules, a small reconnaissance unit, wired directly into the monitoring network. It hovered high among the interwoven pipes, nearly invisible. Its sensors registered even minor shifts in the energy field. Today, that field seemed unstable, and the source of the anomalies moved along the exact same routes as the girl. In another part of the city, far above her, in one of the transparent halls of the upper level, Draive Sollaris studied the data. The hall was vast, and its glass walls offered a view of Acheron's endless heights. From above, the city appeared almost beautiful, glowing lines, harmonious patterns of roads, illuminated bridges between towers. But for Draive, this beauty was merely a backdrop. He stood leaning over the console, watching the bursts of readings on the holographic display. Digital diagrams, indicators, graphs flickered in his eyes' data. The system had collected over the past hours from the lower sector an anomalous pulse. Minor, but steadily repeating, detected yesterday. And today again, he slid his fingers across the panel, enlarging the region. A map appeared, marked with activity points. An uneven trail winding through the labyrinth of the lower level, and at its center, a faint energy trace, resembling a telekinetic vibration. Draive tilted his head, studying it closely. He had seen enough such traces to know this was no accident, no interference. It was an expression of power, real, untrained, unshielded by implants, natural, primary. He could always tell, because he himself had once been like that gifted, or rather, had been, until his ability was altered by an experimental module implanted long ago under government orders. Now he could not only use power, he could draw it from others, temporarily, for hours or days, sometimes longer. But it always returned. The system didn't allow permanent absorption. The body was too fragile to host another's strength indefinitely, yet Draive had turned it into an advantage. He became a hunter, a seeker of those who didn't fit the law's boundaries. His goal was simple: create a network of controlled, gifted individuals who could stabilize the city system and prevent the chaos that, in his view, would inevitably spread without strict oversight. He tapped the projection, placing a marker. Target identified. No name yet, but that was only a matter of time. The collectorium had already dispatched patrols, and one of them was following the target. Even now, Draive felt anticipation. New energy was always an opportunity, and at this moment, he still had no idea that this energy belonged to a girl who had no clue her world had become part of someone else's design. Krista was heading home through a narrow passage when she noticed something small, a speck of dust suspended in the air. It swirled, as if caught in an invisible field. Her eyes lingered on it, and as she watched, the speck seemed to tremble in rhythm with her breath, with the beat of her heart. No. Impossible. She turned away, but felt a faint movement beneath her fingers as she passed a rusty metal panel. The panel vibrated slightly, as if responding to her steps. A shiver ran through her. She stopped, trying to make sense of it, and suddenly felt someone watching her. At first, she thought it was the people below, but the sensation came from above, from the drone. It hovered among the pipes, its lens fixed directly on her. She tried to look away, but didn't manage it, as if an invisible thread had tightened between her and the drone. She felt its system tense, felt it reading the vibrations of the space. Her heartbeat quickened, and a strange pressure rose in her chest, as if an unseen field was boiling inside her. The drone flashed red, registering a spike of unknown origin. And Krista, instinctively, stepped back. At that moment, the metal panel beside her trembled again, then jolted sharply. Not forward, but sideways. And the drone, as if knocked off course by an invisible wave, veered sharply, hitting a pipe. It spun, trying to stabilize itself. Its sensor system glitched. Krista was already running, barely feeling her own steps. Inside her churned a mixture of fear, confusion, and something else. The sense that her body had become a conduit for a power it didn't know how to control. Her apartment was dark, filled only with the hum of old ventilation fans. She stood by the door, breathing hard, her hands trembling. She closed her eyes, trying to recall what had happened. The moment she thought of the drone, that same tingling surfaced within her. The same cluster of energy she had felt yesterday. It wasn't coincidence, and not illusion. Something was truly happening to her. She slowly raised her hand. Her fingers shook. Her gaze fell on a small metal hair clip lying on the table. She focused, or tried to, though she had no idea how whatever she felt was supposed to work. The clip shifted slightly, for a fraction of a second, almost imperceptibly, but her heart skipped a beat. She stepped back, clasping her hands to her chest. The power was real, and she could no longer deny it. Across the city, Draive Sollaris bent over the observation panel. He had just received the latest report. One of the drone cameras had recorded an anomalous trajectory deviation, cause unknown. Sensors burned out, but the data survived. When he enlarged the footage, a faint pulse of energy became visible. Very faint, but real. He narrowed his eyes, examining the oscillation pattern. Early stage telekinetic vibration. But with potential, such cases rarely went unnoticed and even more rarely went unused. A familiar irritation mixed with hunger stirred in him. A new ability. Pure, fresh. He would not allow anyone else to claim it. And somewhere below, in a cramped room of metal and shadow, Krista felt her reality collapse for the first time in her life. But she did not yet know that this was only the beginning. The alleys of the lower sector pressed in around Krista, as if striving to hold her in their metallic embrace. The city had always seemed to her like a vast organism, alive, noisy, unpredictable, but today it felt like it was breathing in rhythm with her fear. Every step echoed through the narrow corridors between pipes, the vibrations returning to her as if someone invisible was repeating her movements. She was on her way to another delivery. Behind her back was a new container, and in her chest a tension that grew with each passing hour. She tried not to think about the strange manifestations of power that flickered more and more often around her. She kept convincing herself they were accidents, coincidences, glitches, typical for the lower sector. But her body knew the truth long before her mind did. Her lungs tightened, her heartbeat faltered, and her skin sensed every mechanical vibration in the air. She knew something was happening, and it had no intention of stopping. The route to the drop-off point led through an industrial corridor, one of those where the pipes hung so low she had to duck. Coolants, energy impulses, exhaust air from the upper levels all ran through these pipes. The area around her was empty, except for a few dark silhouettes hurrying about their business, not wanting to linger. Ambushes happen most often in places like this. Couriers knew it, but there was rarely more than one choice. Krista quickened her pace. She felt that same sensation following her, like the air itself was stretched thin, like a film around her, an inner field, barely perceptible. Sometimes it reacted to her thoughts, her fear, her anger. She didn't understand what it meant, but she was afraid to admit how familiar this feeling had become. Just a few more meters, and she would reach a wider platform where she could disappear into the crowd. But when she approached the intersection of corridors, a sharp metallic click sounded above her. Then a second one, faint but threatening. A rustle that wasn't accidental. Krista looked up. At first, she saw the light red, flickering, reflecting off metallic surfaces. Then the shadows sliding along the pipes, and finally the silhouettes. Collectorm drones. Precise, silent, designed to catch those whom the system deemed anomalous. They moved quickly, forming a trajectory that gradually tightened the space around her. Their sensors blinked, catching her heat, her breathing, her energetic trace. The point of awakening. She didn't know they had identified her. She simply felt the air grow denser around her, as if not only the pipes but the city itself were closing her in. Krista spun around, ready to run, only to see more drones behind her. They slid through the air, blocking the path. She was trapped. Then the world slowed down. Her heart beat once, and everything around her broke into fragments. Neon reflections stretched into thin lines. The hum of machinery turned into a deep, low drone. The rustling of the metal structures became sharp and clear, as if drawing closer to her skin. She felt a jolt inside her, much stronger than before. Not a faint tingling, but a strike like her body was a vessel in which something enormous had been sleeping until now. And now it was waking up. The drones began to move, slowly, but with merciless precision. One locked onto her face, activating a capture sequence. Another charged a suppression blast. The fear was overwhelming. But within that fear, like a spark swallowed by darkness, something else flickered. A feeling that she could respond, that her body wasn't as helpless as she believed, that the power awakening inside her demanded release. The world trembled. The neon lines above her bent, the air rippled, and the impulse inside her surged outward not as a thought but as a wave. The drones were thrown back as if struck by something invisible. Their metal frames scraped against the walls. One lost orientation, another tried to stabilize, but the vibration of the field wouldn't allow it. Krista barely had time to realize what she'd done. Her legs moved on their own. She ran as if the very fabric of reality depended on it. Her heart pounded in her throat. Her breath came in sharp bursts, but her body moved fast, almost instinctively, driven by the need to survive. Behind her came the sounds of rebooting drones. They were recovering. Her footsteps clanged against the metal floor, each impact echoing in her chest. The corridor led her to an old technical zone, a mesh of passages understood only by those who had lived here all their lives. She knew the route, but the drones knew the territory too. They wouldn't stop. They never stopped a chase once they had detected a power manifestation. The pulsing inside Krista intensified. Her fingers trembled. Sometimes, when she felt the proximity of metal, the field around her seemed to stir, responding to her tension. She darted to the side, trying to disappear into the shadows. But shadows no longer offered safety. Sensors were everywhere. Cameras everywhere. And then she saw a familiar light, soft, flickering under a tangle of old overhead structures. Adam's workshop. She almost burst through the door, not even thinking. Her body acted faster than her mind. She knew this was the only place she could reach, the only place where she might feel safe. Adam turned when she appeared at the threshold. His eyes widened at the sight of her, and at what he glimpsed behind her through the narrow gaps in the metal. He understood instantly, understood that the thing they had always feared had finally come. He rushed toward the control panel and shut the entrance. Metal shutters dropped, blocking the passage. His fingers moved fast, executing familiar patterns. The workshop filled with a soft hum, the defense system activating, creating interference around them. It could buy them minutes, but no more. Krista stood in the middle of the room, almost dissolving into it. Everything in her shook. Her knees weakened. She felt the force inside her drain back, the same sensation as when a storm retreats but leaves a ringing in the air. Adam approached her, and she saw in his eyes not fear, but worry for her. He had known for a long time that there was something different about her. He had sensed it, and now it was undeniable. Her body suddenly grew heavy, as if the power that had saved her minutes earlier now demanded a price. Her legs gave out, but Adam caught her in time. His hands were warm, steady, a sharp contrast to her trembling. She felt his breath, his careful grip, his tension, and his desperate desire to protect her. They stood like that for several seconds, the world outside fading away. Just two people in a small workshop filled with old parts and the smell of heated metal. But outside, faint sounds were already approaching. Scanning pulses, drones searching for an entrance. Adam gently lowered her onto a metal platform. She couldn't explain what was happening to her, not even to herself. But he didn't ask for explanations. His hands moved quickly, activating additional barriers, jammers, bypassing locks. He knew this was only temporary shelter. Krista sat there, feeling the power inside her pulse faintly, as if it hadn't fully settled. She didn't know if she could summon it again, or if she even wanted to. But one thing was clear. She could no longer live as before. Hidden, ordinary, naive, and she understood one more thing. Her life was now entangled with a threat coming from the very heart of the system. High up in the upper levels, in his transparent office, Draive Sollaris studied the updated tracking display. His lips curved in a faint, satisfied expression. His networks had found the trail. He saw where she had vanished. And he saw someone beside the target. A weak, energetic imprint. A person with no powers, but with defensive devices. A hacker? A mechanic? It didn't matter. What mattered was that the girl with telekinetic energy had finally revealed herself. Her power was stronger than he had expected. Raw but potent outbursts indicated high potential, and he wasn't going to miss such an opportunity. He issued a command. The Collectorum moved to the next stage. In Adam's workshop, the air grew thicker. The walls trembled with the interference systems he had activated. Every sound from outside seemed like an approaching end. But Krista sat beside him, and something about her had changed. She was no longer the courier she had once been. There was a depth in her gaze now, one she was afraid to understand. Beneath the fear, something else flickered, a power that wasn't going to disappear. Adam touched her shoulder gently, and warmth spread inside her, bringing a flicker of calm. She knew this moment was a turning point from which their lives could never return to what they were, and the city seemed to know it too. It held its breath. The awakening had happened, and now everything was just beginning. Adam's workshop breathed with faint electrical warmth, as if it was protecting the two people sheltered inside. Beyond the metal walls layered with insulation, the world vibrated, trying in vain to break through the interwoven shields. But within these walls, there was silence thick and viscous, as though the air itself was saturated with the tension shared between the two of them. Krista sat on the metal platform, feeling the power inside her slowly settle, turning into quiet pulses. The tension was fading, but in its place came an unfamiliar emptiness, as if something inside her had awakened and no longer wished to return to what it used to be. Adam stood nearby, his gaze studying her with a mix of worry and restless tenderness. He had always been attentive to everything about her, her habits, her movements, her emotions, the parts of her she hid even from herself. And today, he saw a change. Not external, internal, deep, invisible to strangers, but obvious to someone who had known her since childhood. He turned toward his tools, selecting several small devices that looked like metal spheres and a box of various parts. His movements were calm, confident, familiar. He didn't try to speak or to soothe her. Instead, he created a space where she could breathe. Krista watched him, trying to make sense of the connection between her own state and what was happening around her. The workshop had always been a place of quiet for her, a refuge from the chaos of the city. But today, it felt different, as if a tension lived in the air itself, spreading between them, binding them invisibly. She inhaled slowly and felt the world around her tremble in response. Adam noticed and lifted his gaze. He asked nothing. He didn't need to. Instead, he placed one of the metal spheres in front of her and stepped back, giving her space to try. Krista didn't immediately understand his intention, but then she felt the impulse awakening again inside her. Not a burst, not a violent surge like before, but a soft vibration, the breath of something new growing within her. She could sense this vibration as clearly as her own heartbeat. She focused. The sphere remained still, reflecting the dim workshop lights. Her fingers trembled, but she lowered her hands. Touching wasn't necessary. She already understood that. The inner impulse stepped forward. The sphere shifted, barely, for just a fraction of a second, but enough for a shiver to sweep across Krista's skin, not from fear, but from recognition. There truly was power inside her. She focused again, recalling the push that had saved her from the falling platform, the one that threw the drones back. Then, it had been instinctive. Now, it demanded effort. The sphere rolled slightly, paused, shifted again. She practically held her breath. The power responded, as if listening, testing her intentions. And slowly, it took its first steps with her. When the sphere finally lifted no more than a millimeter above the table just for a moment, Krista's heart skipped a beat. Her palms grew cold with sweat, yet warmth spread through her from within, terrifying but beautiful. Adam watched without blinking. In his eyes, flickered admiration not for what she was doing, but for who she was becoming. He saw that this wasn't a random outburst. This was a birth, and Krista felt it too. Adam's teaching approach was gentle. He didn't pressure her or demand the impossible. He simply gave her tasks that felt like a game. He selected objects of different weights, observing how her energy responded. He caught the slightest vibrations, noticed every slip, and offered a new solution. Krista was surprised by his patience. Each object reacted differently to her thoughts. Light ones moved first, heavy ones barely shifted. She soon realized the power wasn't in muscles or concentration. It was inside, deep in the mind, where fear and desire intertwined. Whenever she doubted, the power weakened. Whenever she accepted herself, it strengthened. Adam watched all of this with an expression he tried but failed to hide, a mixture of admiration, concern, and tenderness. He didn't just see a gifted person, he saw someone he'd known all his life, someone now unfolding before his eyes. And the more she unfolded, the stronger the delicate connection between them became. Krista felt it too. In the pauses of breath when Adam leaned too close, adjusting a device, in the careful way he brushed her hair aside to attach a sensor bracelet. In the warmth that rose between them each time her power manifested, the air grew thick with change, impossible to ignore. But beyond the workshop, the world was changing differently, rougher, more dangerously. Krista noticed it the first time she stepped outside after training. The sector was the same pipes, the same vendors, the same metal walkways, yet the air felt heavier. Sensors on the upper levels glowed brighter. Scanning beams were sharper, drones more frequent. Krista sensed them with her entire body. She had always noticed the machines, but now it was as if she could hear their pulses directly, as if her own power was reshaping her senses. Drones became tangible, leaving static trails she could feel. She understood that the collector was tightening its surveillance, and she suspected the reason. But she didn't tell Adam she feared worrying him, though she sensed he already knew. And indeed, that evening, when she returned, he was standing over a terminal, studying a map of the sector. His face was tense, his hands moving swiftly. He already understood. Something was happening. The system was changing tactics. The city was closing in. He explained it to her with gestures smooth, steady, yet full of urgency. He pointed to increased patrols, blocked routes, new observation points. Every movement carried a single meaning. They are searching for her. Training intensified. Krista learned to lift objects at a distance, rotate them, shift them along imagined trajectories. She still couldn't hold heavy items for long, but she felt the potential growing. She learned to control the impulse that had once been chaotic and dangerous. What had seemed impossible yesterday was becoming part of her today. And sometimes, when the power refused to listen, she felt Adam's touch light, supportive. It didn't command, it guided. And in those moments, she found balance. Her body became a conduit for energy, her mind a control center. And the stronger she grew, the closer they became. Their closeness wasn't spoken. It lived in silence, in gestures, in pauses, in breaths that sometimes aligned, in the way Adam's eyes lingered on her face, in the way she felt his presence with her entire being. This wasn't a spark. It was something that had grown for years and now finally found soil. But the world wasn't going to wait. It was closing in. On the third day after they began training, the entire sector went dark. All channels, all networks, all communication lines. Krista felt it as if the air suddenly grew heavy and grim. A pause, then a wave of tension, a vibration rolling from one wall to the other. Adam understood instantly that it wasn't an accident. He rushed to the panel, checking the signals. One by one, channels died out. Scanners registered new activity, not chaotic, but deliberate. The sector was being shut down, jammed, powered off. Preparation. Krista stood in the center of the workshop, feeling the familiar pressure rising inside her. Draive Sollaris had begun his operation. He had sealed off the sector. He was coming for her. She sensed his presence before she saw the reports, as if his energy left a cold trail in the air, a faint distortion that resonated with her own power. And in that moment, she understood for the first time, she wasn't just a hidden gifted. She was the target. Adam grabbed several devices, stuffed them into his pockets, lifted a backpack, handed her an impulse beacon. His movements were swift, precise. He was preparing to run and telling her with gestures that they needed to leave. Now, Krista looked at him and realized he didn't hesitate. He was ready to go with her, ready to leave everything behind, ready to stay by her side. That feeling pierced deeper than any fear. She nodded. The world around her trembled, her power responding to the decision. They exited through the workshop's back passage, slipping between pipes and through narrow corridors where the hum grew louder. Drones were approaching. Scanning systems operated at maximum. Lights flickered. Acheron's atomic chaos awakened. And two people moved within it as one will, one purpose. The city tried to trap them, but Krista's power was growing. And between her footsteps, between neon reflections, between breath and fear, beside her, walked the man who kept her world alive. They fled deeper into the sector, and above them, in his transparent halls, Draive Sollaris watched their movement, zooming in, analyzing energy signatures. His lips curled into a faint smile. The target had fully revealed herself, and soon he would come for her. But for now, between the pipes, in the neon labyrinth, Krista felt something for the first time. Not weakness, strength. Not loneliness, presence. And the web of control tightened around them. Waves of alarm pulsed through the city like underground tremors, silent to the ear, but felt by everyone. Acheron was slowly falling into suppression mode, a rare state used only when the system detected a threat requiring total lockdown. The corridor lights flickered less frequently now. Communication remained cut, and the air grew denser, saturated with invisible scanning grids. Krista and Adam moved through the narrow passageways behind the workshop. It was a network of old maintenance tunnels, the kind no workers used anymore, but which sometimes became salvation for those who wanted to vanish from the system's sight. The metal beneath their feet vibrated, carrying distant mechanical echoes. Heavy patrol drones, slow, massive, relentless. They rarely descended into the lower sector, but whenever they did, nothing escaped them. They detected every movement, every thermal trace, every energy fluctuation. Krista sensed their approach long before the detectors did. Her power knew, untamed, responded to the structure of the city differently than before. Where ordinary people saw only pipes and concrete, she perceived nodes of pressure, currents of tension, ruptures in energy lines. The surveillance system wasn't invisible to her anymore. It felt like a web stretched over every step they took. Her power reacted to danger, sometimes as a trembling under the skin, sometimes as a sharp surge she had to suppress. And the deeper they went into the tunnels, the clearer she felt it. The web was tightening. Adam walked ahead, his hand gliding along the wall as if checking the stability of the passage. He knew the layout of the lower sector better than most. He could find a path where none existed, and avoided traps instinctively. But now, his movements were unusually cautious. He understood that any mistake could reveal them. Krista followed, sensing his calm confidence, quiet, almost tangible. He had always been like this, steady, attentive. Even now, with the sector turning into a trap, she felt his presence as clearly as her own power, and it grounded her. When they reached a narrow bridge between two massive blocks of old infrastructure, the hum of patrol drones grew closer. The metal beneath their feet shuddered, carrying waves of deep vibration. That meant a major search module was only a few levels above them. Adam stopped, raising his hand a signal to freeze. They slipped into the shadow beneath a protruding pipe, remaining absolutely still. Krista saw a heavy patrol drone up close for the first time. Through the grid of the upper passage came its shape, rounded, cocoon-like, unsettlingly alive. It moved slowly, but every pulse it emitted resonated through the metal, trembling the air. It scanned the entire sector layer by layer, missing no fragment of space. Krista felt its sensors as if they touched her from the inside. Cold energy crept closer, sliding across walls, through pipelines, toward the bridge. The power inside her tensed, ready to burst. She forced it down. If it slipped, if even the faintest impulse escaped, the drone would detect them instantly. A heavy shadow crawled over the bridge. The hum grew louder, then slowly began to fade. The drone hesitated for a moment, as if uncertain, then drifted away. Krista exhaled softly, though her heartbeat was still racing. Weakness tingled through her hands, not from fear, but from the effort of suppressing her power. Adam touched her shoulder gently, signaling it was safe to move again. His touch became her anchor. It didn't just steady her, it helped silence the storm within. The tunnels ahead were lower, and the air grew dense. They moved through abandoned corridors, long left unmaintained. Rust clung to the walls, cables sagged to the floor, and in some places water dripped from overhead pipes, creating dull rhythmic taps. No one ever came here. That was their advantage. But Krista sensed something else. Deep beneath this level, somewhere inside the city's structure, something was watching. She didn't know what, but the feeling grew stronger with every step. Adam stopped at an old panel, removed the protective cover, and began rerouting power lines. He worked quickly. They needed access to a forgotten service elevator that led one tier upward, where the scanners were fewer. Staying in this sector was dangerous. Draive Sollaris would keep tightening control until every meter was sealed. Krista watched his hands, precise, skillful. She felt the tension in his movements, but also the unwavering resolve. He wasn't about to leave her, even though logic would tell him he stood a better chance alone. A dim light flickered under the panel. Adam packed his tools, activated a hidden switch, and a narrow maintenance door opened beside them. Behind it lay the elevator shaft, dark, deep, humming faintly with old machinery. Krista felt a slight energy tremor in the air. Lines ran through the shaft, part of the city's main network. Still active, but not fully. It meant they could start the elevator manually. Adam gestured for her to go first. She stepped inside. The air was cold. The shaft seemed endless. In the darkness, faint points of light flickered, signal indicators of forgotten systems. Her power reacted softly. They were weak, harmless. Adam entered after her, closed the door, and began activating the mechanism. The floor trembled. The elevator slowly began to rise. The ascent was long, Section after section passed them, seen as alternating stripes of light and shadow. Krista felt the tension inside her lessen a little. While rising, they were invisible to the drones. The concrete walls blocked the signals completely. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself a full breath. The air was dusty but clean from the oppressive force she had felt below. She stood close to Adam. The elevator was too narrow not to feel his warmth. She sensed his shoulder, his quiet breath, and she realized his tension wasn't fear. He was focused on her. It moved her more deeply than she expected. Her power responded more calmly when he was near. It didn't flare or rattle. It quieted. Adam watched the top of the shaft, monitoring the ascent. But sometimes his gaze slid to her. Subtle, unintrusive, but unmistakable. And in those moments, she felt a new connection forming, thin, fragile, yet alive. A thread born not of fear, not of the past, but of the present. Growing stronger, the lift stopped. The shaft echoed with a mechanical click, and the door opened. They stepped into an old distribution block, a place no one had touched for ages. It held nodes where energy lines once converged. Everything was shut down, but the infrastructure remained useful in the right hands. Krista felt the network beneath her feet thicken. Vibrations pulsed through the structure as though she could hear brittle mechanisms and dormant power lines. And for the first time, she realized the city is alive. The city feels, and her power is tuned to its breath. Adam scanned the perimeter, then signaled for them to move. This place offered a short reprieve, but not for long. The collectorum would soon notice they'd left the sector. They walked through the corridor, each step echoing softly. Metal racks lined the walls, cluttered with old cables, tools, containers of sensors, all faded, dust-covered relics. But amid the decay, Krista sensed something strange, like part of the city's energy network was responding to her presence. As she moved, forgotten indicators flickered faintly. Her power resonated with the structure. She felt she could influence the space, not fully, but in small ways. It frightened and fascinated her. She paused at one of the panels. The metal beneath her fingers trembled slightly but distinctly. Not mechanically, but energetically, the city answered. She pulled her hand back, startled. Adam noticed and turned to her. His gaze was cautious, not out of fear, but because he understood she was becoming part of something larger. She realized it too. And along with that realization came another: her power was going to grow faster than either of them expected. But this level was only a temporary refuge. A minute later, a faint pulse raced through the distant corridor, a quick, muffled beat Krista felt with her entire body. It wasn't a drone, not a mechanical trace. It was something else. A collectorum scan layer, used only when the target was outside the usual monitoring grids. It rolled through level after level like a wave, searching for anything that disrupted normal patterns. And it was coming toward them. The signal was faint but growing, fast. Krista knew it would scan the entire floor. Adam knew too. She saw it in the tension of his shoulders. He opened the maintenance hatch of an old ventilation shaft, the only place that could shield them from horizontal scanning. His gestures came quickly, confidently, but there was something more in them. Care, worry, a fear of losing her. Krista stepped forward. The power stirred again, not destructive, but protective, reacting to the oncoming threat. They slipped into the narrow shaft, pressed close in the tight space. The metal was cold, the air dusty, but it was their only chance to avoid detection. Krista felt the scanning wave approaching, cold as a blade, sharp and smooth, and beside it, Adam's warmth grew stronger. The scan layer passed through the floor. The metal shuddered. The air shifted its density. The power inside Krista tightened, curling around her like a shield. But the signal moved on. They remained unseen. Krista released a breath, as if for the first time in ages. Adam turned his head, and their eyes met close. Too close to ignore the tension growing between them. This silence was different. Not of fear, of something much deeper. The scan layer faded, dissolving into the distant levels. And in that moment, Krista understood her power no longer belonged to her alone. It was tied to the city, to the system, and to the man beside her. And that connection would become both her salvation and her danger. The ventilation shaft descended deep into the bowels of the city, and the air inside felt motionless, as if time itself had stopped here. The metal was cold, the walls narrow. Krista felt vibrations beneath her fingertips, faint, yet continuous, as if the city's old mechanisms were breathing just below the surface. She knew they couldn't stay here long. When the scan layer had moved far enough ahead, Adam gestured that it was time to proceed. He slipped forward cautiously along the shaft, checking the path. His movements were silent, precise, the way he always moved in places where the slightest sound could betray them. Krista followed him. Each of his steps resonated in her consciousness like a familiar rhythm, calm, confident, the kind she could follow anywhere. In a world crumbling around her, he remained the only constant. They emerged through a service hatch into a narrow corridor, illuminated by the occasional emergency lamp. The light flickered, reflecting off metallic surfaces, and Krista realized that no one had walked here for a long time. The layer of dust was thin but even, as if this section had been cut off from the rest of the network. And yet, the air here felt alive. She sensed it immediately. What had once been barely perceptible now became almost tangible. There were no drones, no people, no active devices nearby, yet the space vibrated with subtle impulses like a breath, as if this forgotten, abandoned, lost floor recognized her. Her power responded to this interaction, as if resonating with the place. Adam noticed her slowing pace and turned to look. He could see something happening, but he didn't interfere. He always allowed her to understand what unfolded within her on her own. Krista touched the wall with her fingertips. The metal quivered, slightly, almost imperceptibly, but she felt the response, not mechanical, but energetic, as if lines within the wall were reacting to her presence. She ran her hand further. The subtle pulses echoed her motion, almost following her. It was like what she had felt before, but deeper, more precise, as if the city had been whispering to her all along, but she had been too tired, too scared, too closed off to hear. Now, the connections were becoming tangible. Adam watched. His gaze reflected the awareness that Krista was changing faster than they had anticipated, yet he did not step back. On the contrary, he moved closer. His presence bolstered her confidence, keeping her from plunging into the chaos of her power that might have destroyed her. He was an anchor, and she knew it as clearly as she knew her own name. They moved further, and the corridor gradually widened. Stray cables hung from the ceiling, coated in dust. On either side were empty technical rooms, most ruined by time, some automatically locked. This was once the maintenance area for distribution modules, controlling the city's energy supply to lower levels. Now, it was just a shadow of its former self. Yet Krista felt that deeper down the corridor lay something active. Not a threat, but a node. A connecting link between the old infrastructure and the still functioning network. They headed toward it. The light softened, muted. The city's hum vanished completely, and it felt as though they were moving into the depths of some underground temple. Silence filled the air, not empty, but alive. And then, suddenly, the space ahead opened up. They entered a vast hall, an old energy center. The ceiling vanished into darkness, and the walls were covered with ancient cable patterns. In the center stood a massive circular platform, the dying core of the distribution network, ignored for decades. Yet it still lived. Krista felt its breath instantly. Faint impulses radiated in circles, like ripples on water. They were gentle, yet deep. When her foot touched the platform, the node responded. A pulse ran through the hall. Slowly, majestically, almost welcomingly. Adam stepped closer, staying near. He was alert. Mechanical nodes could be unpredictable, but he saw there was no danger here. From the platform emanated a strange silence, not that of a malfunctioning network, but of an old memory. Krista took a step forward, and something opened within her. Not like during the drone chase, not a flash, not an instinct, but smoothly, consciously. She felt a line of energy beneath her feet, ancient, but still functioning. She understood it was a node through which the city's stabilizers had passed for decades. It was tired, yet alive, and it recognized her power. Her fingers trembled, and she lifted her hand. Her gesture was cautious, like touching a living being. And as her palm hovered above the platform's central point, the air filled with a subtle hum. The vibration grew stronger. The impulse traveled up her arm. She did not lose consciousness. She did not fear. On the contrary, for the first time, she felt her power obey, not the chaos of emotion, but the rhythm. The platform responded to her presence not as a machine, but as part of the city, as if her telekinesis were linked to something greater than mere object movement. Adam watched, holding his breath. He understood. This meant more than it seemed. Krista's ability was no accident. It was part of the structure, part of a system Sollaris had used for decades but never truly understood. And that was why she was dangerous to him, and valuable. When the impulse receded, Krista felt weak. Not exhausted, but the kind that comes after deep exertion. Adam caught her by the shoulders, keeping her from falling. His hands were warm, steady. He slowly helped her step away from the platform, and her breathing evened out. The closeness between them grew not from fear or pain, but from what was happening around them. The city responded to her. Her power grew, and Adam was the only person she could trust with this revelation. He gently ran a hand along her back, and she felt tension release. This connection grew stronger, and she could no longer deny that she was drawn to him as power is drawn to its source. But time was running out. The platform began to fade slowly. The impulses weakened. The city seemed to retreat inward, not hostile, but as if hiding traces, knowing someone would come. And someone was indeed approaching. Krista turned sharply. She heard no footsteps, only the tremor in the space. An impulse, strong, cold, slicing through the air. She knew that signature. Her power responded with fear, as if her body's memory itself recognized the threat. Draive Sollaris. He was approaching this level. She sensed him as a distortion, a dark void taking what did not belong to him. He was far, but his energy penetrated through the network like a shadow sliding along the city's lines. Adam saw the change in her gaze and understood everything without words. Sollaris is coming, and the node that had responded to her became a beacon. They hurriedly left the hall. Corridors that had seemed quiet now filled with the sense of impending threat. Light flickered differently. Air density shifted. Krista sensed the network beneath them contracting, as if closing the paths they had taken. Sollaris did not know their exact location, but he was heading toward the network's most resonant point, and that place was here. Their presence accelerated his approach. Adam led her through side corridors, narrow, dark, barely lit. He knew they couldn't go back the same way. He moved with rare focus, and Krista understood. He was using all his knowledge to find a path not on any map. The power inside Krista had changed too. It no longer surged chaotically. It was tense, concentrated as if it understood the threat itself. She could almost sense the line of Sollaris' approach, feeling the chill where he directed his attention. This man took the powers of others, and he was coming for her. When they reached the technical pipeline sector, Krista felt a distinct jolt of energy for the first time, as if the network itself tried to warn her. She heard it inside herself, like an inaudible call. Not words, Not thoughts. A sense that in this part of the city there was a passage that could lead them higher. The city seemed to show her the way. She stopped, and Adam turned to her. She pointed to an old metal grate, unremarkable, yet beneath it lay what called to her with power. Adam quickly removed the panel. Behind it opened a narrow vertical shaft, a maintenance lift for old pipes. Rust-covered stairs led upward. Krista felt a fresh flow of energy from above. It was safer there, at least for a few minutes. They began to climb. The corridors below already vibrated with a cold resonance. He was coming. They climbed quickly, hands sliding along metal, breaths growing faster. Adam watched Krista, and though she felt fatigue, she moved with confidence, guided by the power that had now become part of her. When they emerged onto the next level, the air changed. Cooler, cleaner. The world grew quieter, and she felt that Sollaris had left no trace here. For a moment, they were safe. Krista stopped, breathing heavily. Adam stood beside her, gently touching her hand, as if checking for injuries. His gaze was deep, concerned, yet soft. These touches were an anchor for her, and the longer they remained close, the clearer it became. The bond between them was growing, and that bond would be tested beyond mere power. She lifted her gaze. The city around them was gray and quiet, but beneath the surface it listened. It sensed her, and Sollaris too. And Krista knew. The journey was only beginning. The new level was strangely quiet. Too quiet even for a sector cut off from the network. The air was cold, as if it had just passed through powerful cooling filters. The light in the high-arched gallery was soft and diffused, unlike the harsh neon of the lower levels. Krista stood still, pressing a hand to her chest, feeling the residual pulse of the node echoing inside her. Not pain, more like the aftertaste of a connection she didn't yet understand. This level was higher, farther from the Collectorum's influence, and yet the same pulse lingered here, only softer, gentler, like the fading memory of an old network someone forgot to shut down. Adam carefully examined the space. His gaze moved over every structure around them, massive grates, reinforced pipes, cable bridges. He always thought in routes, where one could hide, where one could pass, which places could become dangerous. Krista knew that focused stairwell it had saved his life more than once. Her own perception of the world had changed. Everything around seemed more transparent, as if hidden network lines had become visible. She felt the slightest vibrations, whispers, energy echoes, and she sensed Sollaris wasn't here. His presence had dissolved on the previous level, but that didn't mean he had retreated. His energy lingered below, like the trace of a predator who had lost the scent but refused to abandon the hunt. They moved on. The corridor opened into a wide space, reminiscent of an old logistics hub, a place where heavy cargo convoys once passed. Now, it was empty. Only a faint rustle of distant fans hinted that the system still lived. Krista felt everything differently now. The block of doors ahead was locked. A simple, old-fashioned control panel, not electronic, but mechanical. She stepped closer, brushing her fingers over the cold metal. As she touched it, the energy inside her responded on its own. Not a flare, more like a subtle push. The panel trembled. Internal bolts clicked, and the door slowly opened. She wasn't surprised. And Adam wasn't either. He only paused beside her, studying her profile for a second, as though trying to grasp the depth of the changes happening to her. His gaze held no alarm. Instead, it carried a mix of admiration and worry. He could see she was no longer the girl he had known in childhood. Her power was growing so quickly he could barely keep up. And still, he didn't step away. They continued forward. Behind the door stretched a large technical zone, where old cooling lines had once been serviced. The space glowed with a cold, bluish light. Here, the silence felt deeper, like the stillness of water in an underground reservoir. Heavy, but not threatening. Krista stopped at the center of the platform. Her body froze in a strange inner quiet. She heard not just the mechanical hiss of filtration, she heard what lay beneath it. The faint energy threads under the floor, thin lines stretching from one wall to another. An inactive yet living skeleton of the network. The city was responding again. Or speaking again. She wasn't sure which, but Adam saw her change. He saw her hand rise on its own, her gaze deepen, sharpen. He stepped closer, not interfering, but protecting her with his presence. And in that moment, the space around them seemed to halt. Inside Krista, an impulse formed. Not strong, barely tangible, but enough for thin metal fragments scattered around the room to begin trembling. Adam noticed several small parts on the floor gently rising by a centimeter. A faint rustling of metal filled the air. Krista felt a strange clarity, as if her power no longer struggled for control but unfolded its boundaries. She was becoming part of something larger, not the network, the city itself. Something hidden beneath layers of technology and decay. The city wasn't just hearing her, it was answering her. She lowered her hand, and the fragments floated back down. Silence crashed over them like water. Adam stepped closer. His shoulder almost brushed hers. He didn't touch her directly, but his closeness was warm, solid, real. His gaze was focused, filled with understanding and worry. He saw her power responding not to fear or chaos, but to a bond she hadn't yet acknowledged. He had grown used to protecting her, but now he understood. She was becoming someone no one could chase or break. And still, he was afraid for her, because the world never accepts those who step beyond its limits. Krista felt his emotions, even though he said nothing. Their connection was growing denser, deeper. She felt his presence in every breath. She knew his worry wasn't for himself, but for her. That warmth seeped into her, pushing out the cold she always felt after each surge of power. Adam gently brushed his fingers against her hand carefully, as if afraid to disturb the fragile harmony of the moment. She did not pull away. Instead, her hand found his on its own. And in that instant, everything changed. Not around them, inside her. The city froze, the air stilled, the light softened. Krista lifted her gaze, and in his eyes, she saw what he had hidden for years. Tenderness, attachment, the fear of losing her, a feeling that had grown with them and that he had kept inside until the world fell apart. She stepped closer. Her body moved on its own. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she saw Adam's breath catch, as if he too was fighting something important. This moment was inevitable. He slowly raised his hand, touching her cheek. The warmth of his fingers was real, grounding, filling. Krista closed her eyes for just a heartbeat, and that was enough for everything inside her to become clear. The world could collapse. Sollaris could follow their trail. The city could pull her deeper into its hidden network. But here, in this quiet moment, stood the man who had remained beside her always. Her fear dissolved. She leaned toward him slowly, carefully, as though touching something delicate. But their hearts had taken the step long ago. Their lips met. Not hurried, not urgent, not fierce, soft, warm. As two people who had waited far too long to admit what had always been between them. The kiss was quiet but powerful. It washed away the tension of the past days. It united them not through words, but through breath, through trust, through understanding that they were one. Her fingers tightened around his hand. His arms slipped around her back, gentle yet steady, and the world around them disappeared. The city held still. The light formed a soft halo. The force inside her didn't try to break out. Instead, it calmed, harmonized. They stood like that for a long time. Longer than danger allowed. But in that moment, danger didn't exist. Only the two of them, two people, the world tried to tear apart, who found each other in the midst of chaos. When they finally broke the kiss, Krista still felt the warmth of his breath. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Adam brushed his thumb across her cheek. keeping his hand near her face, as if afraid this moment would vanish if he pulled away. And then she understood. They were no longer just running together. They were bound to each other more deeply than any power. And Sollaris, no matter how strong he was, could no longer take from her what now belonged to them both. The way back was gone, and the point of no return had begun.